Hey, this is V, so welcome back to my bite-sized book reviews. For the last few days, I've been reading The Cartographers by Peng. So this story follows a young woman called Nell who learns at the beginning of the book that her father, whom she hasn't spoken to in 7 years, has just passed away. So she currently works at a company that makes reproductions of old maps, and originally her dream job was to work with real maps in the New York Public Library. But because of her dad, she was fired from her job at the library 7 years ago and essentially cast out of her field of study. And because of this, her relationship with her dad is extremely complicated. Anyways, when she learns that he passed away, she goes through his things and discovers that he has an old highway gas station map. And this really shocks her because it was because of this map that he fired her 7 years ago. So when she decides to enter the map into the library database, since it seems like it was what her dad was working on, she discovers that out of the more than 200 other copies of the map out there, every single one, except the one she has, is listed as missing, stolen, or destroyed. And this begins her search, both to learn more about her father and to learn more about this map that essentially ruined her life. This story is kind of structured as two different interwoven narratives. So you have the present day story, which follows Nell and her ex-boyfriend Felix as she tries to learn about her father and exactly what happened 7 years ago. And this part is written in third person. Then you have the first person story, which is told from the different points of view of her father's friends as she finds them, and they're telling her about the events of something that happened when she was very young, surrounding what happened with her father, her mother, and her mother's eventual death. So these two interwoven stories sort of come together to form the story of this group of strangers, or not strangers, but strange, mysterious people that call themselves the Cartographers. So I guess what I liked about this story was definitely the concept. So there was a bit about this idea of maps and the way they can affect the world. So there's a little bit of magic in this story in that I guess you could say, since maps reflect the way the world is, there's certain types of maps where changes that people made or additions that people made can actually create impossible spaces in the real world, like rooms where there weren't actual rooms built into the building. And you can use these maps to find your way to these, places that technically don't exist. So that whole idea is really cool, and I think it does a really good job of building the mystery and also just telling you a little bit more about the field of cartography, which I admit is something that I really don't know that much about and I find pretty interesting. It talks a bit about the real world maps, the history of maps, and also the kind of maps that people create for fantasy stories like Discworld and Lord of the Rings, these series where people created maps in a different kind of style, apparently, that captures this idea of the fantastical and it gives it a kind of reality on paper. So that part I really liked. Something that I think started to wear on me, though, was the fact that the tone of the story was so grim, especially in the first-person perspective sections, on the past, there was this constant foreshadowing that something terrible was going to happen, and I think, as the story went on, that part really starts to get to me, where I kind of want to get to the end because it was just so dark, I think, that it started to affect my mood a little bit. But overall, I do think it was quite an interesting story.